Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Fueling Tomorrow. I'm your host, Erin Bailey, and today we are joined by our Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Jere Thompson. And Jere, thanks for coming to the studio.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Aaron.
Today, we're going to learn all about you and your career. You started at Diamondback in March of 2021, and you were VP, SVP, and EVP of Strategy and Corporate Development. So, talk to us about your career before Diamondback and then what you did in those three roles.
So, started off in banking, was in Houston and Dallas for 2 years after I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 2010. It was one of those things that I honestly thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so, up until really the spring of my senior year, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the banking route was one where it was interesting to me because you got to explore all different types of industries. And I really, again, didn't know where I wanted to go or where my career would take me. So went to Amegy Bank down in Houston, did a training program for about 18 months, cycled through their commercial side, their energy side, and their corporate side, and decided that I loved the energy space. And so when I got to Dallas, was able to start work in the Dallas energy office. And at that time, the Dallas office was covering Midland companies. So the
Okay.
Permian Basin was essentially going through a massive transformation, which was super exciting. And we're still drilling vertical wells, but shale was kind of the topic du jour. And as I started digging into these companies, of which Concho was one, I very quickly realized like banking's great. I've enjoyed it, but I want to get in on the action and I want to get onto the industry side. And so in the summer of 2012, I started putting my resume out there, had a great meeting with NGP where they politely told me that I did not have the skill set that they
Thanks for
that
putting
they
me with
were
them.
looking for, but they'd be happy to put me in contact with some companies in Midland. And so that afternoon, they actually sent my resume over to Price Moncrief and Matt Geisinger
Oh.
at Concho, and I began talking with them and kind of had to claw and scratch my way into the door, but persevered. And fortunately, in July of 2012, was able to start at Concho. Was the lowest man on the totem pole. Was just there to learn. It was perfect because at the time, no family, no kids, didn't really know anyone in Midland, which is a whole nother story. But so started working there. Um, Worked my way up a little bit. But at the time, it was a three-person group, and it
Wow.
was IR, corporate finance, a bit of business development, but also kind of board management. So we would put together all our board packets and really try and shape and craft the narrative of the corporate story. So loved that role. Ultimately, by the time I left Concho, we had transformed into a much larger organization. A lot of the things that I was doing at the beginning now had their own leaders and own organizations. And I was responsible for planning, and it kind of had three facets. It was operational planning, which is real time data analysis on both like well performance and the well cost side.
Okay.
I'm not an engineer and
Yeah. I
never,
was like, did you learn that in
no,
school?
no. But fortunately had some really, really talented engineers that were in the group and, ran that process for us and were the liaisons between the asset teams and, what we were trying to accomplish on the corporate planning side. And then we had our corporate finance function, which is basically like what you would expect for a finance graduate to
Hmm.
do, kind of your day to day, financial modeling and that type of thing. And then last but not least, we'd stood up a fundamentals group, which we started right before COVID. Had a really smart individual come in and take the reins there, a guy named Matt Warburton, who's now one of our partners at a midstream company called Whitewater.
Okay.
But we were able to go in and he put together some really great models more on like the supply and demand side, not only of the lower 48, but globally as well. And that helped us a lot as we navigated the COVID waters.
Oh.
So anyways, as we moved into 2020, um, navigated through that COVID time period and
Hmm.
then ultimately Concho sold to Conoco. And so the day the Concho deal got announced, it was October of 2020. I texted Case and I said, Case, would love to have a conversation. And he was kind enough to text me back. And we had a lunch over at the Petroleum Club And then after the lunch, we sat in his car in the garage at Faskin and kind of hashed out a role over about 45 minutes. And the role was VP of Strategy and Corporate Development at Diamondback, and was one that he had held
Mhm.
previously. To me, it was super vague. I had no actual responsibilities and no direct
You're like, "I don't
reports.
really know what I'm
Yeah.
going to go into, but I'm
Um,
for it."
yeah. So it was one of those situations that it was definitely, a blank slate. And to me, when we were looking, or when I was looking at Diamondback, I truly believed in what Travis, Case, Danny, Matt had built. And it was just an incredible foundation and springboard into what I viewed as a very kind of hockey stick like rebound post COVID. And so, at the sale of Concho, my initial thought was, okay, do I want to transition out of the industry? And if so, what does that look like?
Mhm.
And I immediately came back to the idea of no, like the world still needs the products that we produce, and not only at current demand levels, but demand is going to continue to rise over the next decade, and I want to be a part of it. And it's not time to exit the industry. And you know, fortunately, there was an not an easy button, but there was an easy first step, and that was just going across the street.
And for you in your profession, was it, I guess, exciting knowing it was kind of a blank state and you could help build that?
Absolutely. At first when I came in, I remember, I was sitting there that first week trying to figure out what I was supposed to
Mhm.
do. And that was in itself a
A little
challenge.
terrifying.
Yeah. But, I went back through, and the first 2 days, I just essentially got the digital archive of earnings calls and conference call transcripts, and just read and listened and said, okay, what is Travis about?
Mhm.
What is Case about? What has Danny built on the ops side, and how is this going to translate into the next 5 to 10 years? And so kind of took that, and fortunately had, again, no real responsibilities at the time. So fortunately had the time to really do a deep dive. And, we came out of that, and we had just closed the QEP trade. And
Oh,
so immediately got staffed on selling the QEP Bakken, which was a long and arduous process, but we got it done. But that was kind of my first foray into BD, and ultimately following that exercise, and as we moved into 2022, was able to take on BD and have a more active role there. So the role got a little more defined after
yeah.
12
You're like,
months.
okay, now I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the BD side always appealing to you, or did you not really know you would step into that until it happened?
Yeah, I'd always at Concho, we had a really strong BD team, and I was, involved on the corporate M&A side. So when we acquired RSP, I was, a part of that trade. But as it related to the day to day, kind of divestitures, swaps, trades, that kind of thing, I really was just on the outside looking in. So the ability to come over to Diamondback and take on something new was definitely exciting. It was a big challenge.
Mhm.
Case, he wanted me to learn, and he wanted me to learn quickly. And fortunately, Matt McGrofsky was there, and helped me quite a bit along the way, to where, by the end of 2021, I felt like we were humming, and
Yeah.
I felt a lot more
And you'd only
comfortable.
been there 9 months.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So then we moved into 2022, and the acquisition started coming in, and we did Firebird and Lario. And Firebird was the first negotiation I'd done in person, and we were at their sponsor's office, which is Redbird Capital in Dallas, and they've got a beautiful office in this complex called Old Parkland. But you walk into the conference room, and there's this giant T-Rex skull.
You're like, who are we
I
working with?
know. And I think they have it just because it's beautiful and a great
Uh-huh.
conversation piece, but it was also super intimidating at the same time. I'd never seen one before.
Yeah, I can't
And
say I have either.
yeah. So, anyways, that was the first deal that I was able to negotiate in person, and super excited with the outcome there. And from then, it was kind of off to the races.
Yeah, and the deals haven't stopped.
No, they haven't. And that's what's been such, a unique opportunity for me, and for our BD team as a whole. We've got a fantastic team that is able to take on, for the size of the team, let's call it, 8 to 9 folks. What we're able to do is comparable to some and other organizations that have closer to 50
Mhm.
folks. And so, super proud of everything we've been able to accomplish as a group. And it went from QEP sale to Firebird to Lario. And then, fast forward and you're doing Endeavor and Double Eagle, and not to mention everything that Austin and the Viper team are doing as well.
Yeah.
Where you've got GRP, Tumbleweed, Drop Down, and then dovetails into the Cydio announcement a couple weeks ago. So
Mhm.
it has been very busy, but that's again what attracted me the most to Diamondback was, you go back and everything that Diamondback was able to accomplish was through inorganic growth. There was no asset just gifted to them.
Yeah.
And so you basically kind of went through, 2012 on acquiring and divesting and trading and just coring up your acreage position because you had to.
Mhm.
There was no, I talked about an easy button earlier. There was no
Yeah.
easy
No,
button.
you did it the hard way.
Yeah. And so that was something that was a total blast to get to do. And, we're definitely not done. So a lot to come.
And with all those roles, in February, you stepped into the role of CFO,
Yeah.
and now it's been almost 6 months. So, how have those first few months been? And is there anything in this new role that you weren't doing before that you're excited about?
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. It's a huge honor to get to lead the finance and accounting functions of this company. And for me, the biggest change was getting to work more closely with the accounting team.
Mhm.
So now have much more frequent communication with Tracy and Kara, and Kara's got incredible people that help her every day, and getting to go to Oklahoma City and meeting them and working with them, day in and day out has been really special. And it's amazing what that Oklahoma City office is able to
I was gonna
accomplish.
say, touch on that a bit
Yeah,
because not
I
many
mean,
people know what our Oklahoma City office does.
yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story, and old, it goes back to the early 2010s. But when Diamondback was a Wexford portfolio company in Windsor Permian, its kind of sister company Gulfport Energy had some shared services. And so over time, as Diamondback grew, they obviously branched out and did their own thing. But um, accounting and IT and land admin ultimately stayed in Oklahoma City, while some of the other functions migrated to Midland, which became
Mhm.
the new headquarters. And so today, as those facets of the business have grown, there's nearly 300 people in that office, and we've got a great building there that's right off of the old Chesapeake
Yeah, it's
campus.
beautiful.
Yeah, stunning. Aubrey McClendon did a fantastic job of developing that campus, and the facilities are incredible.
There's a full track,
The full
which is
track,
insane.
I can't say that I've gotten much use out of it, but
Next time.
yeah, next time. It's really a unique campus, and the cafeteria is phenomenal. They've got an Olympic-sized swimming pool,
Yes.
which is cool.
Have you taken advantage of that?
And I can't say that I've done that either. But I'll bring my trunks next time.
Yeah, yeah,
So
a cannonball competition.
exactly. But we've got a great space there. We're expanding. We just got another floor, and so it's a core piece of what we're able to do at Diamondback. And frankly, for me, it's just really a privilege to go there, meet the folks that really make those groups within the organization hum, and watch those groups continue to grow with the company.
Mhm. And you touched a little bit about your schooling,
Yeah.
but when we were in our podcast prep, you mentioned that you didn't even like your finance
No.
classes. So you majored in finance and history,
Yeah.
but what was it throughout? Was it those classes that you got to see the different aspects of where finance could play that
Yeah.
brought you to a career in the financial sector? Or talk about a little bit about how that decision came to be.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough in high school to be dually enrolled, and so I got a bunch of college credits along with some AP classes, that translated to me coming into UT as basically like a sophomore. And so at the end of my actual freshman year, I went and met with my advisor. Nice lady, but she ultimately said, congratulations, you'll graduate next spring. I said, well, I don't really want to graduate when I'm 20.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
Fortunately, my parents were supportive of me staying the full 4 years, and I was able to kind of take a look around the university and say, okay, well, the history degree is great, and we've kind of checked that box. Well, what could I do to kind of broaden my horizons and
Mhm,
ultimately, potentially have a path into the business realm? And so, was able to get into the business school, started taking my business classes, and honestly didn't love the accounting courses. It was it was a lot for me, but over time, I realized that while history may be more interesting, at least in my 20-year-old mind, there was the accounting piece that could ultimately get me a job, and,
yeah.
that
That's what
that
when
matters
people
too.
say they're a history and they're like,
Yeah,
what are you gonna do?"
exactly. And it goes back to the beginning of the conversation when I mentioned kind of going down the legal track. That
Mhm,
was kind of it was kind of teacher or lawyer with the history route. And so this opened some additional doors, and going in again, moving into my senior year, it was like, what are we going to do here? And ultimately settled on banking. But for me, I've been much more focused on financial strategy than I have on more accounting fundamentals.
mhm,
And it goes back to having such a strong accounting team in Oklahoma City, where Tracy and Kara are fantastic at what they do, experts in their field, and provide the level of support and experience that, frankly, both Case and I need, to
mhm.
be able to go do and execute on the more strategic vision.
And working with the OKC team, especially closely in that way, are there any specific projects or initiatives that you're really excited to be a part of?
Yeah, right now we're doing a big treasury management project, and Connor Williams, who's the manager of our treasury team, is doing a fantastic job leading that. We're in the final stages of selecting a new treasury provider, but basically what we're trying to do is find a bank that can help us streamline our processes as well as provide a new level of technology that
Mhm,
can basically sit on our existing systems and allow us to do a lot of things much more quickly and efficiently. So it's been going really well. The team has put in a ton of work getting to this point, and got a final meeting this afternoon, and we'll make a decision. So very excited about the direction that this has gone, and super proud of the team and everything that they've been accomplished to get to this point.
and you've held a lot of positions over the years, worked with a lot of different people. What would you say your leadership style is, and how do you think it's evolved over the your career?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just empowering the subject matter experts. I like to think that I'm okay at a lot of things, but not like great at one single thing.
Mhm,
But having that 30,000 foot view, I think helps when you're thinking strategically and not missing the forest for the trees. And so my leadership style is a little more hands off, which I think is typically well received. And you have to talk to the folks that work with me, but um, I really believe in letting people start and finish projects and be the owners of those projects.
mhm,
I think ownership is such an important piece of the day to day, and when you can take something from the starting line and run it across the finish line, there's a sense of accomplishment and pride that I think goes a long way and allows you, when you're doing a lot day in and day out, to really be able to shoulder that load because you have, that amount of energy, and you have that amount of or that sense of accomplishment that drives you to the next deal.
mhm.
And whether that's on the BD side or the accounting side, or whether it's Connor and what he's doing on the treasury side, I just think it's super important to give people the opportunity to spread their wings and really test the limits of what they think they can accomplish.
I think it's evident with how you lead at Diamondback, but I think that goes for the whole leadership team
Yeah.
as well. You guys all empower us to do what we do best.
And that's, I think it's such a unique aspect of this organization. And the goal is you're a big company, but let's not be, this is something that we used to say at Concho, but let's not be big and dumb,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, and I think it started with Travis and his trust and his executive management team. And he's very, very good at being there, but not essentially being on top of you
Mhm.
and until he needs to be. And I think Case does the exact same thing where, he'll let you run 150 miles an hour. And if he feels like he needs to hit the brakes and jump in and ride shotgun, he'll do that too.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, take the wheel.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But, it's again, having the confidence in everyone doing their jobs. And we have such great people in these key roles that, I think we're in a really unique position where the succession planning has taken place and Case is in his new seat, and that really allows us a long runway where you've got a relatively young executive management team and a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. And I think that uniquely positions us across the space where it's interesting because of the industry being so cyclical. You do have age gaps
Mhm.
in a lot of different organizations, and you have, in a lot of cases, some senior leaders that are nearing or past retirement age, and there's no clear successor. And the rest of the management team is kind of in the same boat. And for us, fortunately, because of the board and Travis's foresight, we're in a totally different position.
And when you look back over your years,
Yeah.
especially since we have all our interns at Diamondback right
Mhm.
now over the summer, what is some advice you would either give to, say, the interns or your younger self about getting started in the energy sector or the financial sector?
It sounds, I hate saying this, but it sounds corny, but it's enjoy the ride.
Mhm.
And, as I mentioned a second ago, there's so many ups and downs, and you learn as much as the downs can stink. You learn so much when you're under pressure and you're experiencing trials and tribulations. And, at the time, you can sit there and go, man, I don't want to go into work today, or,
Yeah.
how am I going to sleep or whatever. And you look back 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years later, and you say, well, that was one of the best learning opportunities that I really had. And, I learned A, B, C, and D, and that's going to help me position, years 5 to 10 of my career
Mhm.
because of, what I was able to glean from that time period. So that's one. I think two is don't be afraid to jump out of your comfort zone. For me, it was as simple as moving to Midland.
Yeah.
And like that sounds a little silly. But I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a place to live. I actually, the first couple weeks I was here, was sleeping on a couch, and I had one of those rods in the back of my Tahoe, and all my clothes were were in the
Closet on
in
the
the
go.
closet. So, fortunately, I had like a robe, and I would walk outside in the mornings and go to the closet and pick the clothes I was going to wear
The
and then
neighbors are
walk
like,
back in. Yeah,
"Oh,
it
okay."
was a little different. But it was new and exciting,
Mhm.
and I loved it. And it was taking the risk of, I was living in a house with Dallas with my five best friends from college,
Mhm.
and it was, moving out. And
When you told them that you were going to Midland, were they like, "What the heck?"
yeah, I mean, it was interesting because we were really, I mean, we were having the best time.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
No one wants to leave the
yeah,
college life.
and it was basically, college round two. But for me, it was, I really think that there's something special happening in West Texas and in the Permian Basin. And the closer I can get to it, I'm honestly proud of my 24-year-old self.
Mhm.
It's that idea that the closer I can get to it, the more I'm going to be able to, experience something that's unique and have an opportunity for growth that I think is different from a lot of my peers. And it can be hard attracting talent to Midland, particularly non-technical talent, because there are so many finance, accounting, legal, IT jobs across, the state of Texas and frankly the United States as a whole. And a lot of those are occupied by people that prefer maybe a more urban environment. But if you're willing to just take a little leap of faith and try it, it can make a huge difference and pay dividends over the long run. So, for me, having that willingness to go take a little bit of risk with the idea that, like, hey, if this doesn't work out, I don't really have a place to live anyway, so you can just,
Yeah.
literally get in the car and drive home.
Yeah.
But fortunately it did, and I had great mentors at Concho, and so thankful for, all the time and effort that guys like Matt Geisinger put in to get me up to speed to where, I literally went from knowing nothing about the industry to being relatively proficient in a couple years. So yeah, I would say, be willing to go out, try something new. And then in the day to day, like pay attention to detail. And have it's especially early on,
Mhm.
just being able to grasp the ins and outs of the business is so important. Um, and it's little things. It's not having typos and
Yeah.
whatever you're sending in your email, or it's having s- coherent sentences, and it's trivial stuff, but you'd be amazed how often people just gloss that over, and more of a effort to just get things out the door and move on.
Mhm. And when you think to your 22, 24-year-old
Yeah.
self, arguably for anyone, starting the real world is scary. So, touch on how important mentors are in that part of your career path, but then also just really being able to have that perseverance and see it through.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And I was so fortunate to be able to bounce ideas off my dad for a long time. And excuse me, he was, or is, he's been a great role model for me. And he basically, when I gave him this idea of like, hey, I want to move to Midland, was all for it, and was super thankful for that. And ultimately, when I got to Midland, it was sh- everyone was so excited for me to be there, which was great. I don't know why, but we had an executive management team at Concho, and Tim Leach, and Jack Harper, and Will Giroux, and Bryce Moncrief, that all took me under their wing. And it wasn't just, hey, let me give you some advice in the office. It was, come over for dinner.
Mhm.
And, Jack, I remember the first time I went over there, his girls were all, I don't know, I think the oldest was 10 at the time, and,
Mhm.
and his oldest is getting married this summer. So
Wow.
and his second is babysitting for us in Dallas now, and is a graduate of TCU, and doing great. But it's fun being able to not only come in and get advice in the office, but really form relationships outside, and to have executive leaders that are willing to do that is something that's super impactful. And so, that's a goal of mine. I'm not always successful at it, but I think it's something that Travis and Case and others within the executive management team definitely recognize, and are willing to put the time and effort in to form those relationships outside of the office, to where you can really have meaningful long-term bonds. And regardless of whether you're at Diamondback or somewhere else, you'll always have that sounding board, which I think is super important.
Yeah, and for our next question, I'm gonna read it because I don't wanna mess it up.
Okay.
But this year, you've been named an honoree for Oil and Gas Investors 40 Under 40, an award that recognizes individuals who embody entrepreneurial spirit, innovative problem solving capabilities, leadership, and community engagement. We've talked a lot about your career, but what does it mean to you to receive this honor?
Yeah, it's look, it means a lot. And not because of, the definition you just read, but
I was like, I can't
yeah,
memorize that.
but more because of the people that, I get to be grouped with. And, fortunately, Austin Gilfillian, our president of Viper, was named as
Mhm.
well. And, Austin's a little younger than me, and has had an incredible, fast track through the organization. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy getting to work with him day in and day out, and really think, he's got a very unique trajectory. And it's one of those things, we were talking about the advice you'd give to your younger self and the attention to detail. Austin not only can get the 30,000 foot strategic view, but has an unbelievable grasp of detail. And he knows that business inside and out. And that is something that is so unique. And, frankly, just speaks to his overall intelligence. And so, it's fun to watch others succeed. And, we have some banking partners that are within that group too. There's a guy, John Kruger, who's one of our great partners at Bank of Oklahoma, that was named as well. So it's more of an honor just to be with that group of people, and super excited about what it means, for the group as a whole, and it's something that I'm proud of, and yeah,
It's great.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks.
And now we're going to learn a little bit more about you personally.
Okay,
Not too many questions,
okay,
but tell us where your favorite place is to eat in Midland.
okay,
And then what is this one I didn't put down, but I want to know when you are here with your family, what's your favorite family activity to do?
okay. So favorite place to eat. I think one of my proudest Midland moments,
Oh, this is, yeah,
yeah,
you have to share it.
it was, I think it was it was Christmas, maybe 2019. But I walked into Cancun and was given a Cancun leather jacket,
Yeah.
um, it's black and it has Cancun right here. And then it has Jere Thompson right on the right-hand side. And, that was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
I would
I'm
still
surprised
put,
you don't have the jacket in your office.
uh, you know, um, Kate, my wife, and I think she thinks I might be a little smaller than I am. And she told Neme that I was a large instead of
Oh,
an
okay.
XL. So it's a little snug, but it hangs proudly in the closet.
Yeah.
And there's a small group of folks
I was
that
gonna say,
have
how many
these
people
around
have the
town.
jacket?
I think I've counted 3 now. Now
Ooh, an elite
it
club.
is. Someday we've talked about having a jacket
A
wearers
jacket
dinner,
dinner?
kind of like
Like the
the
Masters?
yeah, exactly. It's the
Do you
champions
pick the
dinner of
menu?
sorts.
Yeah.
But moral of the story is, we would go to Cancun probably once a week and still love it. Actually tried their new restaurant last night, and
Mhm.
it was great to see a ton of familiar faces
Yeah.
that are working at that restaurant as compared to
They
the other
probably
one.
miss you.
They may see me more now than ever, but
Yeah.
yeah, the food was great, and it's a fun spot where my girls continue to want to always go back. So that's great. And then as it relates to activities, one thing that we love to do was go down to Marathon, um,
Okay.
and do the whole Big Ben deal.
Yeah.
And the girls, we kind of stopped late as the girls were kind of in the toddler age.
I was like,
Um,
do they hike?
yeah, no, I mean they do now,
Yeah.
but at the time they didn't. But that White Buffalo bar,
I haven't
there at
been.
the
I need
Gage
to
Hotel. Oh,
go.
it's so cool. I think they've got there's an actual White Buffalo mount in the bar
Okay.
that's supposedly insured for $1 million. I don't
Oh,
know. Very that may be a
just what I've
old
heard.
wives' tale. Yeah. But yeah, that was always fun, and we love doing that. Pre-kids, with kids. Honestly, we were fortunate enough to have a pool,
Mhm.
and it seemed like no matter what the season was, it was just pool, 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 and we had a great outdoor grilling area, and that was my favorite thing to do on Sundays is just grill and swim. And
Yeah.
it could be the middle of December, and you just heat the pool and off we
The
go.
best part about Texas.
Yeah, that's right. Other than Uri when it had 4 inches of ice,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we
It's a
got
rink
past
at
that.
that sport.
Exactly, exactly. But yeah, Midland, so thankful for this town and the people and everything that it's given to my family. It's really a special place.
And is there anything else that you want our listeners to know?
I think we've done a good job
I
of
know.
covering it today.
We learned a lot about your story.
Yeah. But I'm super excited to be in this role. Can't thank the teams that work with me enough for all that they do day in and day out, because we're a very active company and a lot is asked of a lot of people. And to be able to do it what they do on a daily basis, and do it and with the attitude that they have, and frankly just their ability to go out and succeed makes my job so easy. And so again, just thankful for the organization, and really excited for this year and beyond. I think we're so uniquely positioned.
Mhm.
I think when I look at an organization in the oil and gas space, there's really 5 things that I point to. And the first is people, which we've talked about. Second is a strong balance sheet. Third is low cost operations. Fourth is rock quality. and 5 is inventory duration. And fortunately, Diamondback checks every single box. And that means nothing but good things for us and, the trajectory of the business.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for coming to
Yeah.
chat with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Everyone, on behalf of Jerry and myself, I'm your host, Erin Bailey, and that does it for this episode of Fueling Tomorrow. We'll chat with you next time.